The Deep Dive podcast is powered by Atla.im and brings you real stories from the Isle of Man's business community. Hosted by the Atla Group, we explore the journeys of entrepreneurs, business leaders, experts, government representatives, and our own team.
Hello humans, welcome to the Deep Dive podcast brought to you by Martin, that's me.
And Lyle.
That's him. Today we're joined by Rich. Rich,
that's
for joining
me.
us today. Yeah, that indeed. Thanks for joining us today, Rich. Appreciate your time.
It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Maybe just to give our listeners a bit of context to who is Rich, do you want to give us a bit of background of your from roadie days to being here today? In a couple of minutes.
Yeah, that's a long story.
When
I left school, my name is Rich Mulholland. I'm an entrepreneur. I was born in Glasgow, Scotland. Grew up mostly in South Africa and recently moved to the Isle of Man. I started my career as a rock and roll roadie. I was a lighting designer. I got to tour with many cool bands like Iron Maiden and Def Leppard. I very quickly realized that wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I knew I wanted to be more in business. I went into the business side of things. And also in South Africa, you realize quite quickly you don't have work in winter because South Africans don't like going to concerts when the weather is bad, which is funny because obviously if that was the case here, we'd never leave home. And so I realized that there was another part that of the business we could service that was evergreen, and that was the corporate market. So at Gearhouse, I started a small little corporate division called PSL Conference Services. We would do lighting, sound, and staging for companies, for their conferences. They happened all year round. And then quickly I realized that I was a cure for the wrong disease. It didn't matter how nice the lighting, sound, and AV was. If the presentations were crap, it was crap. So I moonlit and I started my little business, Missing Link, on the side. And within 3 months I'd left. We had like 4 staff already and we were working with some really big companies. That's 27 years ago now. We've had several businesses and other companies as well. But as it stands right now, we've got Missing Link, which is the presentation company, and Too Many Robots, which is the fractional AI company. Okay. That was a minute.
We'll dig into that. What the presentation, I mean, we'll dig into presentating. I think it's often seen as an art and a challenge for people. What made you, were you just comfortable in doing that? Was that...
No, in fact, so I started the business in 1997, and my first talk that I ever gave was in 2003. I was absolutely a skinny chef. I had no idea what I was doing. I made it up. It was all delusional self-belief. The truth of the matter is presentation is not an art. It is a science. A mediocre presenter with a good narrative structure will always outperform a bombastic, capable speaker with none. Right? So it's not so much about...
When did you figure that out? Just from watching the poll presentations.
Yeah, so relatively early in that we realized that, first of all, bizarrely, and I think it seems counterintuitive until you think about it, then it's very intuitive. And we realized very quickly that if we had somebody who thought they were a poor presenter, say we had 2 different speakers who both presentations weren't good. One was a naturally good speaker, so they were enjoyable to listen to, but their presentation wasn't good. And the other was somebody who wasn't naturally good. What we realized quite quickly is the person who wasn't naturally good was much more trainable. We could get them to good a lot better than we could get a natural speaker to good. Because a natural speaker already thinks they're good. So they're already, but everyone loves me. I get off stage and they'll have a great time and everyone tells me how wonderful my presentation is. I said, yeah, but nobody bought your thing. So, your presentation is to deliver a message, to evoke an emotion, to achieve a desired result. That's all presentation is. You're presenting in order to evoke an emotion, and the emotion's job is to create a result. And if you can't do that, it doesn't matter how fun you are, you're not a comedian, right? So we've got to solve for that. So we realized quite quickly that, well, then if it isn't the skill, then what is it? And we figured out that it was the structure. It was the narrative flow, the way that the story is structured to hook an audience, to keep them on the hook, and then to leave them where they want to take an action. That is actually just in the way that you tell it, not in how you deliver it.
So I suppose just like selling a product, obviously ultimately we're talking about selling a product here, so if you sat one-on-one with a client, it's ultimately the same conversation.
100%, because there's no difference, right? You're always selling something. If you're a motivational speaker, you're selling people on the idea that life is nice. If you're on stage talking about some new invention that you've created that will change the way education works, you're selling them that idea of the future of education. We're setting ideas always.
Yeah, interesting. And you mentioned a couple of times there in that conversation, you're saying we. Who's we in those early days for you? Was it, do you have a business partner or?
Yeah, so in fact, this is, as of February this year, is the first time in my career that I've had no business partner. So there's been a few different partners along the way. The guy I started the business with was actually, I was also the marketing manager of Gearhouse at the time. And he was the guy who did the layout of our adverts. So he could do graphics and, multimedia production and things like that, and I could sell. And so that's where we started. I bought him out after about 2 or 3 years. It was actually myself and another staff member bought him out. That guy actually eventually came to me one day and said, I hate owning a business. Can I just sell you my shares and work for you? And we're like, yeah, cool. In fact, originally he said, can I just sell you my shares? I said, cool. And then the day we finally finished the deal, it was like a little bit up and down and, a little bit of anger here and that there. And then finally the deal was done. And I was like, cool, well done, shook his hand. And he said, well, do I have to leave? And I was like, no, you're welcome to stay. I was like, sweet. So he carried on working for me for a few more years. And then a lady that had been working in my business and really, really took over, she became my business partner for a while. She had 20% shares. She eventually left to help her husband run his business. She's now back, but she came back as a managing director of her companies, not as a shareholder. She was quite happy to have a different level of responsibility, and she's absolutely the engine room of the business. She's incredible. Her name's Samantha.
Now being on your own doesn't change.
Well,
do you like the fact you're now, let's say, fully in control?
So I would say no, except I think you should always have somebody you want to go to war with, right? Like business is lonely enough, or it feels potentially lonely enough, but I think that's a bit of a myth. I think that it doesn't have to be. And I will honestly tell you that I don't think Sam has behaved in any way differently. She doesn't act like she owns the business less, even though she doesn't. It feels like her business in every single way. So even though I technically don't have a business partner in terms of equity, I think I absolutely do have a business partner in terms of responsibility.
So those early years in getting the business going, if we put an entrepreneur hat on, just talk about those, not necessarily struggles, but those generating the concept out, getting people to believe in what you were doing, finding clients. How was that in those days? Did you find that quite easy? I appreciate it's a while ago now, and maybe it's less of a struggle because the memory forgets these things.
Well, no, I don't think it's less. I don't think it was a struggle at all. Okay. I think now is a struggle.
Oh, interesting.
It's amazing to me. I actually ended up doing a video the other day on this, in that everything feels harder now than ever did before. It was easier when I didn't know what I didn't know. I had complete and utter delusional self-belief. I was 22 years old when I started the company. I mean, when I look at 22-year-olds now, I think, geez, what was I even thinking? But I wasn't, and I didn't know. So I had so much confidence and so much belief in the work that we were doing that people were abusing their audiences, that there was human attention was getting wasted every single day, and it was my job to make sure that 100 people standing in front of you didn't have their time wasted. If you're on stage for an hour and there's 100 humans, that's 100 hours of human attention. And I was like an activist. I truly believed. And the other thing is that the base was so low that even without really knowing what we're doing, we could still make you 10% better. And that was enough. That was enough to make you completely not shit like everybody else was. Whereas now, that was easy. Now I know what I don't know. I'm aware of my place in the bigger world. And actually, the world has come on quite a bit. We've all seen TED Talks. We've all seen Steve Jobs speak. So the level of presenting has actually gone higher. And if anything, I found it to be a trickier sell, the better we get.
Oh, interesting. Rather than you touched there early on about the self-belief, that hasn't changed, though.
It's completely changed. I have way less. I don't understand. And again, this was the theme of the video I did maybe last week. And it's very weird, but I find that people, one of the things, I just turned 50 2 months ago. And one of the things I find that's so bizarre to me is that we age out of confidence. So confidence is something that we have. You never had to think about being confident when you were in your 20s. I was so confident about stuff. I had so much belief. But as I get older, I feel slightly less confident and slightly more humble. And I think it's because when I was 22 or 20, let's say 25 years old, I believed I was the center of the universe. I thought all of you were in my movie, that this was my film, and I was the star, and I absolutely believed that I was the main event. Of course, now, I think if you still believe that by the time you're 50, then it's actually a gift if you're in business, but you're an arsehole everywhere else. So now I recognize that I'm not. Now I recognize I'm one of 8 billion people. And all of a sudden, it's hard to feel quite special when you understand that. The other thing is, when you're 25, you are writing expectation checks. So it's very, very easy. You live according to the future expectation of yourself. So when you're 25, you're like, I'm going to be this when I'm older. I'm going to do that. I'm going to have a private jet. I'm going to have this. By the time I was 28 years old, I had a stretch limousine. We used to drive around with a chauffeur everywhere. Life was amazing. Then I had a Porsche, and life was amazing. And now I'm here, and I have a Toyota. And it's not that work is doing less. I think I care about different things. But when you're writing expectation checks, everything is the future. And everything is how I'm going to be. When you get to the place that you're supposed to start cashing those checks, it feels different. Because for a while I had to realize, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, I want to throw this back, but if you had asked the 22-year-old version of yourself, if they had to read your CV today, would they feel that you had fulfilled expectations or not? Now, in my mind, maybe I set too high expectations, but I don't feel like I had.
Yeah, so if I flip it back, and just when you talk, I'm 48 now, and I go to 25-year-old Martin, who'd have no confidence, no self-belief, and spent years trying to build that. And I think I'm still on that journey, and in my mind, I'll be on that journey until the day I die or stop working, let's say. So, and I do absolutely appreciate I'm just a dot in the whole scheme of things here, and whatever job I do in the business or whatever I do outside of business, it's not relevant, is it? Because we'll all be dead in the ground in due course. And anyone can do what I genuinely believe that anyone can do what I do, which is maybe some lack of self-belief. So I don't know, and I don't know whether that's because as a youngster I didn't have that drive, that self-belief, that maybe I'm still, let's say, on that upward trajectory of getting to that point of going, that maybe I feel like I hear from your side. I don't know.
Yeah, probably not much younger than you guys, but thinking from my experience, it's more of a peaks and troughs experience of that confidence and learning and introspection and perception. So there are phases that I've been through where I feel like, listening to you, it's probably just a phase of reestablishing what that confidence is for the next phase, and certainly finding a role like the role that I'm in now has given me immense confidence, because I feel like I've found where I can make a lot of impact. But if I'd go back and look at my 25-year-old self, I'd probably maybe be a bit disappointed. But being at the age I'm at, and something you put on your website, about being mostly a husband, father, brother, son-in-law, those are all things that for me make the most impact. And so perception would say, if I hadn't done everything I did on the way to this point, I wouldn't have all of this in my life. So I can't be disappointed, because otherwise I just wouldn't be where I am, and I'm really happy with where I'm at.
Well, that's the tension, right? Is that I'm very happy. Like, I'm really happy. I love where I live. I love my family. I love my life. It's very, very hard for me to parse all of this, because on one hand, I am certainly not. I did not live up to the expectations of the 22-year-old version of myself. But on the flip side, that 22-year-old version of myself had no expectations beyond money. So that 22-year-old version of myself had a very, very narrow view on the reality of the world. And whereas I think I have now a 360-degree view. And as we have a nice business. Life is good. It's not like I feel that I'm doing worse. I think I'm way better from a business point of view than I ever was when I was younger. But it's just that when we measure ourselves against that, it becomes tricky. And I think that one of my big realizations is I've given far too much to that guy, far too much time trying to live up to the expectations of that version of me. It was a different human being. There's so little in common with the person I was when I started Missing Link and the person I am now, other than I still fundamentally, deeply, deeply, deeply care about the abuse being put on audiences every single time people open their mouth.
So you just mentioned there, again, need a couch and a sofa, but you say living up to that 22-year-old. What was that?
What did I think I would be? Oh, I thought I'd be world famous.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I understand that. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I definitely never thought that at 22, and don't now either. Okay, so Missing Link. So I know you've written some books as well. So I presume they ultimately interlink with your story. So do you want to just talk a bit about those books?
Yeah. So one of our companies is called 21 Tanks. It's a perspective lab. We work under the assumption any group of smart people struggling with an innovation-based problem is not because they're not smart enough, it's because they're too smart. And we realized that quite quickly, and I wanted to write a book about my core thinking, and the book was called Legicide. It works on the fact that legacy thinking is the silent killer of innovation. So in an established organization, innovation doesn't happen when you start doing something new, it happens when you stop doing something old. And as soon as I realized this, because we work all with corporates, so our client base was all big, large corporations. The reason for that is that they spend budget, whereas small businesses spend money, and they may look the same on the balance sheet, but they are fundamentally different things. I always advise, when I speak to entrepreneurs, I only have kind of two things I'll say to them with confidence. The one is sell to people with budget, and the other is that yesterday would have been easier, tomorrow will be harder. Everything else is subject to change. So that was the first book on legacy thinking. The second book was called Boredom Slayer. It's a public speaker's guide to presenting like a pro. So as a speaker, I've been lucky enough to speak in, over 46 countries now and 6 continents. And I wanted to share what I've learned doing that. So that was that. The third book is called Here Be Dragons. And it's about the idea that people have been told a lot that they should tell more stories. But I don't think that people want to hear your story. I think you want to sell them new stories in which they need you. So that was a book more around the sales aspect of our business. A big part of our business, we help people create their sales narratives. And then the book that I've just finished now, that comes out in March, is called Relentless Relevance: How to Be a Threat to the Future so the future isn't a threat to you.
And Rich, so I mean, it's quite a dynamic, varied journey that you've had, that you've been on, and so how did you end up in the Isle of Man?
By luck. It's amazing. I feel like I won the lottery. The short story is that my kids are getting a bit older. My son's 21, my daughter is 17. My daughter knew she wanted to study medicine. We realized that she probably has the best opportunity to do that outside of South Africa. And so we started looking around. I also realized that I generated a level of wealth that made me live a really good life in South Africa. But if ever the rand deteriorated, I would become a prisoner of currency. And so I wanted to, in the last 10, 15 years of my working career, I wanted to build up international wealth. So we were looking around for different places, and then my sister went to an event where a whole bunch of people came over from the Isle of Man, and she was like, wow. And I was speaking in Greece on the day. She sent me a message that, have you considered this? We watched a whole bunch of videos from that Amadeus guy, I don't know if you've seen him. So anybody who's recently moved to the Isle of Man has seen Amadeus. He's an Isle of Man YouTuber, a German guy who basically does how to move to the Isle of Man videos. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I watched a bunch of those. I sent them to my wife. Jazz was all in. And what we realized, my sister came to visit it, then my parents came to visit it, and everyone loved it. So we didn't come to visit it. We just decided to hell with it. Right. And the first day I'd ever been on the Isle of Man was the day that we moved. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was I think Jade Matthews had introduced Jazz to me at one stage.
Yeah.
Because Jade had done a year here. I'm like a Gap student at the Craigie Bar, something like that. But we'll thank Jade as well.
Yeah. There's so many tiny little data points of people that came over, and of course, if you are culturally South African and you're looking for another place to move where by sheer volume it's the easiest place to fit in, like this is quite surprisingly from the outside probably the easiest softest landing for somebody who's culturally South African anywhere in the world, just because of the per capita amount of us here.
It was it was one of the Indaba events that you
Yeah.
went to as well.
Yeah.
Learned a little bit more about. So we obviously instrumental in part of that Indaba, and we're going to be going out again in March. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on what you see as attractive to other entrepreneurs, because we mostly deal with or speak to entrepreneurs, and for people considering moving to the Isle of Man, what your initial, having been here just a short time, I know we've chatted about it, not in this podcast, but some of the maybe unique propositions that the island has to offer.
I mean, I think there's so much. So the first thing is I see it as a bit of a gateway. I find it easier to deal with a lot of international companies. Companies are very used to dealing with companies based on the Isle of Man. It's seen as around the world as one of the jurisdictions that people kind of expect people to have a bank account for. So doing international work, sometimes people didn't want to pay into a South African account. It was a bit tricky. Nobody has it. It's very, very, very frictionless when you're dealing with somebody with an Isle of Man bank account. So much so that many people actually would have them even if they hadn't moved here. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, for us originally, and this has actually changed slightly since I moved here, it was a very, very easy way for me to live somewhere to operate my business from. But, a lot of the work we do is in the East Coast of the United States and Canada. And so we had the base of operations here, but we were dealing with them there. And it just became very, very easy to do that. For me as a professional speaker, I feel like I'm much more central to the world. So there's a lot less friction in hiring me to fly over and to speak at places. But one of the biggest things is that I don't carry 100% of my thinking when I'm driving around, and this is going to sound like a small thing, and most people roll their eyes at it until they understand. I didn't realize how much time I was spending being outwardly aware when I was driving, when I was doing anything, when I was walking, and how much of my brain capacity was spent on worrying about other situational factors based on where I lived. Whereas that doesn't exist in any way now. And I don't think that's a problem with South Africa. I think any big city you're aware in. I exist here if you did want to mug me or steal my phone or my computer, it'd be very, very easy to do because I walk around here in a state of complete lost in thought. I'm so unaware of other people. And in fact, it was one of the things when I first moved here, I thought that people were maybe a bit rude when they were walking because people didn't naturally say hello when you walk past them. And I realized that I come from a country where when you walk past somebody, your first thing you do is you look up at them to assess them. You're kind of doing a threat assessment. And then you catch eyes. And then the only polite thing to do is to say hello. Whereas here, I can walk past 20 people and they're not even aware I'm there because they've never bothered to do any type of threat assessment. So my brain feels so free and open. That's why, I've launched a new company since I've been here. I've written a new book since I've been here. I've written a new keynote since I've been here. I feel that the capacity of brain that I'm able to allocate to thinking, if you read, Cal Newport's Deep Work, if you want a deep work upgrade as an entrepreneur, that happens, you can't avoid it here. It happens by default just by arriving. Mm. Now there are other fiduciary reasons why it makes more sense and lots of things you guys are experts on. Just as the entrepreneur in me though, that's something that nobody told me about.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Actually, having travelled with Lyle and seeing you operate in South Africa, I can see that power getting used when it's just because of the space you're in, and obviously it's a country so you know the brain capacity that you have to use to. And I'm not picking on South Africa because, like you say, there's many places.
Yeah, in London I feel as hyper aware.
Yeah, exactly.
In Glasgow I feel as hyper aware.
And often, as a Manxie, when you get on that flight back to the island, if you've been away, there is almost like these kind of like relaxation in it. And often you put it down to, I'm just going home, but it's not. It's that.
It's 100% not.
I don't need to be checking my phone every second day or thinking about who's coming around the corner, etc. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
I've often explained it as the subconscious stresses that you don't actively, you're not thinking about consciously. They're things you're doing, and then you come here and you suddenly feel that sense of relaxation, and you wonder why.
And it's brain power you can use elsewhere.
It's massive capacity. So if you imagine you have a computer system, and a computer system built into a car, and you've got a limited amount of RAM. Mm-hmm. And that computer system, that autonomous car, is spending all of its time thinking about is there a threat? Is that car? Is that dog going to run into the street? Is it doing that? That's a lot. A lot of the memory required does that. Now, when you exist in a place, and when you're navigating through a big city or navigating through basically anywhere I've ever been to, except for here in Costa Rica. Like I always say to people, like, we are Europe's Costa Rica. It sounds stupid because you don't think of it in weather, but even Tradalur and Pura Vida, they're kind of the same mindset as well in terms of the way we think. When you free up all of that capacity, your brain is a vacuum that has to fill. Now, if you're say a natural entrepreneurial thinker, which I think I am, I'm always looking at, so for me, all entrepreneurship is fixing a problem or filling a gap. So my brain is always trying to fix a problem or fill a gap. And now I have time to just think and see it because I just leave my awareness at home. And, I'm probably going to die in a car crash. Yeah, it's terrible. I'm going to go off a bridge.
Crossing the road.
Yeah, exactly.
Trying to fix a problem. Can we go back then to switch back to a conversation earlier around, well, two things. Like out of curiosity, I'm interested now in regard to TED Talks, how you get invited on them, or I'm interested in how does that work to get involved? Do you have to pitch to them? Do they ask you? How does that all work?
Yeah, you have to pitch. My first one, actually, they approached me, I remember they approached me and asked me if I would speak, and then I said yes, and they said, "Cool, please apply." I was like, "This seems crazy." That was a TEDx event. I've spoken to a bunch of them. I now understand the system. And in fact, I've written a blog post about it, and Ted came back and explained it to me. So the general way you would do it is, and again, this is something worthwhile for everyone to know. If you want to be a speaker at all, whether you want to be a speaker, for stage marketing purposes, as an entrepreneur who wants to, sell your thinking from the stage, or get paid to speak, or indeed speak at a TED Talk, people don't buy your talk. They buy your talk title and tagline, right? So you don't have to sell the entire talk. The talk only has to exist at the point you're on the stage. People, and they're also not buying you. A lot of time people say, well, you got to have a great personal brand. That's fantastic. But if you're not famous, then they're not buying you. They're buying your talk title, right? If I'm some... I just spoke in Romania to a group of people that had no idea who I was. So I was recommended by somebody, but basically they bought, does this talk title feel like something that our audience would want to see? And so that's true for TED as well. Now, this translates into the beginning of your talk. And your talk title and tagline should solve for the beginning of your talk. The only thing you have to worry about when you get onto stage is you have to do two things. You have to have clarity and you have to have curiosity. I've got to know what topic we're talking about, and ideally I should give a shit about it. I should care about it, right? People have gas tanks, give a shit tanks. And your job when you get on stage is to fill the gas tank. So the way I do that is I make sure that there's a topic that we're talking about, and then I've got to introduce a ripple to make you curious. So if I get on stage and say, I want to talk to you today about purpose, and say, I think we need to all try and figure out what our why is. Every single person's like, okay, well, I can check out here because I've heard this, I've seen this movie so many times. I've cynicked myself to death. People have asked me what my why is for the last decade. I get it. But if I got on stage and said, today I want to talk to you about purpose and why I believe that we have been lied to about purpose, and while personal purpose might be what's leading to stress and emotional fatigue and things like this, and actually maybe holding us back from fulfilling our potential. Now there is clarity on a topic that generally people care about, purpose, and curiosity, but like, wait, what do you mean?
Yeah, I've been doing this.
Yeah, I don't understand. Why are you saying that that's bad for you? And so if you can open like that, if you can create something for TED that has those two elements, here's a topic people care about already that's in the zeitgeist, but here's my ripple on it. That's going to be interesting to an organization like TED.
Okay.
And I suppose, Richard, it's not only applicable to someone who's going to do a public speaking gig. This is applicable if thinking about the Isle of Man, thinking about our business. That those same maybe principles apply if you're a client-facing person, or you're trying to sell anything, a service, your business, your brand, whatever it is. I imagine those same kind of things apply. Is that?
Yeah, 100%. So Lyle, if you go in and you sell, there's a guy called Julian Shapiro, and he talks about the four novelties: counterintuitive, counter-narrative, elegant articulation, and shock and awe. When you introduce anything new to anybody, people want a novelty, right? So shock and awe is easy. A lot of futurists will talk about this. Here's a robot dog running down there shooting with machine guns and lasers out of his bum or something, and that's like, oh, wow, I want to watch that. It's a cheap trick, but it works. Elegant articulation is Simon Sinek, Start With Why. I mean, that's just personal purpose. It's the same story. Or Mark Mason's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Like you've heard of the book. There's no way to bleep out F***CK. I hate that because everyone has to think the word. He's just not willing to say it. But that book is just Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, right? That book was written 20 years before called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. It's the same book, but it's just an elegant articulation. Wonderful novelty. Just say something in a new way. The other two, and the main two that we often focus on, is to be either counterintuitive, oh, that's not how I thought that worked, or the one that I lean into the most, counter-narrative. You have been told X, I want to tell you Y. Now, if you're selling anything to anyone, if you're not counter-narrative, then you're selling the category. So if I wanted to sell like an air conditioning unit to you, if I was just selling the fact that you really, your bedroom is too hot and you can't fall asleep, if you believe me, then I've opened the door for all of my competitors. But if instead I turn around and said to you, well, hold on a second, I love air conditioning in rooms, but my wife never wanted me to get one because she says that when it's on at night, it dries out her eyes and she hates the noise of it. Like, it just keeps her awake at night. So, so when we invented our one, we actually built in a built-in humidifier that actually doesn't do that. So it actually keeps the room at a perfect humidity level. But also we got audio engineers to change the sound that it creates so it actually operates at white noise, which, as you know, it helps sleep. So we get the environment correct, we both from a temperature and a humidity point of view, and we create white noise conducive to better sleep. By doing that counter-narrative, I've now sold you on a different problem to everybody else. So this is what we talk about, a unique problem that only we can solve. So the counter-narrative at the beginning is that you don't have a cold problem. What you have is a humidity problem or a noise problem. And so once you believe that, you're now stuck with two choices. It's no longer a 5-horse race. It's me versus the best of the other 4. And those are the only odds that should be acceptable. If you cannot turn your sales presentation into a 2-horse race, you've not dug deep enough.
So we started this part of the conversation about TED Talks. So we were chatting before we came on air. I was listening to one a couple of days ago that you were doing in Pretoria on, and I think the general headline, I suppose, was knowledge and action. Do you want to just talk a bit about that talk? So I was quite interested around this conversation around inaction, and I'm a big believer that we as humans, we tend to do a lot of that. So maybe you could just set the scene about what that talk was about, and then we can kind of dig into if you can remember it. It was 4 years ago.
No. So the first thing is that this is exactly what I was talking about, clarity and curiosity. My opening slide of that talk, it was called A Catastrophe of Inaction, which, by the way, is a nice name for a poem, but a terrible name for a talk you want people to watch. But the opening slide of the talk is knowledge is power. And I put that on screen and says, is there anybody in the audience that disagrees with this? And of course, nobody does. In fact, there's a little hint for anybody. If ever you want to ask an audience a question, the worst mistake you can do is to ask people for affirmation. If you say to them, by a show of hands, show me people that agree with this, nobody wants to put up their hand for anything. So even if they think they'd agree with it, they don't want to put up their hands. You must always ask an audience a question in which the answer you want requires them keeping their hands down. You'll get almost 100% compliance every time. So is there anybody here that disagrees with the statement? Nobody does. I said, well, I do. I think knowledge is absolutely not power. And then I talk about the fact that, we had knowledge that apartheid existed. Was that power? Did that help us? No. We had knowledge that, factory farming exists. Does that stop us buying a hamburger? No. We have knowledge that we're creating so much plastic waste, but does that stop us ordering from Shein or Alibaba or Temu? No, not at all. And so knowledge isn't power. Knowledge is it's a luxury that we associate with power that isn't actually true. And as soon as we understand that, we can start thinking in a different way. So I opened with a counter narrative.
Yeah. So and then if we expand on that, the basis that knowledge is only power if you use the knowledge.
Right. So the, at the time, and it's quite funny because my Goodreads list just came out last night. It's like the Spotify Wrapped. My Goodreads, I've done 56 books this year so far, and I used to always map this and think, I became obsessed with reading more books. And we all like that. We've got to have read the latest, greatest book. So you've got, a bunch here. What's that? There we go. There's one of there we go.
Yeah, noises.
And so we think we want to consume all these books, and we have to read the new one. Oh, did you read the new Yuval Noah Harari, Nexus? It's not very good, by the way. But you have to stay up. And I thought, we're consuming knowledge calories, but we're not burning them. The only way to burn them is through action. So what happens is if you keep consuming knowledge calories just by consuming more information, you're actually creating almost like knowledge fat. It's going nowhere. It's not going into your brain. And so you're thinking like you read something, but you just forget it. And I believe that we need to slow our consumption of knowledge until we can prove that we've taken action from it. So when you're reading a business book, you should write yourself a list of, you should be looking at a business book with the purpose of actions. Or if you go to a conference, don't go to the conference for knowledge, go to the conference for actions. And instead of writing down just bullet points, this is a note, notes are what we write down to allow our brain to forget. Right? It sounds counterintuitive, but it's absolutely true. You write down things not to remember them, but to allow your brain to forget them. So you don't have to hold them there. But if you put an action towards it, you're now writing a check that future you has to cash. And so don't allow yourself to go to another event until you've checked off 5 of the boxes of the 10 from the last one. Don't allow yourself to pick up another business book until you've actioned at least 3 or 4 of the things from the book that you have just read. That's the way that you burn the knowledge calories. And that was the premise of that talk, is that we overvalue knowledge and we undervalue action. And we need to almost do intermittent fasting for learning.
Yeah, that was the thing I wanted to talk about, the intermittent fasting. I knew there was, because when I was listening to the talk and just thinking about, we end up deep diving about other things, and I appreciate we're not here to talk about fasting, but I'm quite interested. I guess there's probably many sides to you around lifestyle choices and things we do. Do you get frustrated? So we talk about, like when I hear that message of inaction, do you get frustrated by the world we live in where there is inaction? Therefore, maybe injustices. Maybe there's more of a personal question.
No. I think I don't. So I don't like. I think frustration is a complete waste of an emotion. You're spending energy thinking about something that's completely out of your control. So I spend very little time working on things that are outside of my control. I'm avidly anti-news. So I don't like learning things in the middle of the news cycle. I don't think it's a good point to form an opinion. I know this sounds terrible, but you're unable to form a meaningful opinion until the story arc is finished. So I love history. I love learning about the news after it is concluded. That's when we can get meaningful lessons. All we can get when it's inside the news cycle is propaganda. And I would live in a permanent state of frustration if that happened. I would rather than be frustrated about the inaction that happens in the world about certain things, I would rather be an advocate for how I think the world should be lived. It's the same thing that so we discussed earlier. I eat a vegan diet. I think that some vegans are, quite activist about it, and they get very, very frustrated with people who don't see the light. I don't have any qualms about doing that. What I want to do, Lyle and I had lunch recently. We went to Vibe Cafe, which is an incredible restaurant on the island. And I would far rather take people to a really nice environment that makes really, really delicious food and not discuss veganism at all and let them form new opinions themselves, rather than be frustrated that they don't see the world the way that I see the world. Now, of course, if you ask 28-year-old me, I owned Croakroom Records, a punk rock record label. I was, militant punk. I'm still punk in ethic, if not appearance, and it would have been different. But right now, I try to look at how I can be a better person rather than the world should live the way that I want it to work.
And is that just, I suppose, back to the conversation earlier, is that through just age experience that you've learned, I suppose, to control the controllables and ignore the non-controllables.
Look, I did a really good job of front-loading my assholery. Okay, I was. I mean, again, the way I spoke about myself when I was in my 20s, I really did believe. I believed I was the thing, the man, the everything. Like you have to be a bit of an idiot to buy yourself a stretch limousine. But there I was. I mean, it was more of a marketing ploy and a joke, and I stand by it, and I would do it again. No, it really was. We had a really cool office, but it was far away, and we had to get our clients to come there. So we thought, well, everyone feels great when they're in a limousine. And then when they get out the limousine, they feel like a star. And we say, you know how that feeling you just got when you got out of the limo? We believe that that's the feeling you should get every time you walk off stage. Yeah, okay. That feeling is how you should, and it sounds silly, but you get it immediately. If you've ever been in a limo and you get out of a limo at a nightclub or a restaurant, you feel a certain way. Imagine you felt that way every time you walked off a stage. That's what we're in the business of. And so as a marketing tool, it was very, very powerful. But I also liked driving around in a limousine. Yeah.
So just maybe from my side, just to finish off on that then, to go back to the presentation we touched on earlier, if you have to give it, like say, it's a daunting, generally if you strip it back to its basics, most people don't want to get on stage, don't want to talk in front of people. How do you just start building from that base, which is, let's be honest, where most people start from, even if they are public speakers. Most people who are, well, I wouldn't even, it's not about being introvert or not, but most people, their start point is,
well, I'm very introverted. So by default, I'm very introverted. I'm very socially awkward. So the first thing is content confidence. All confidence comes from how excited you are about the message that you have to give. So if I cornered you in a restaurant or a pub somewhere and I asked you a question about a topic that you're passionate about, you would have no problem publicly speaking about that topic. In fact, if I found the right topic, for me it's board games, I could go for hours and that would be super easy. So we work under that. The reason that most people are bad at presenting is that they deliver every presentation in their life once. So presentations are things that they go on, they prepare some content, they present it. It's not great because you can't figure out anything once. Right? There's nothing in the world. There's no band got on stage and played a song for the first time and thought it was brilliant. Right? So they rehearsed and they did it, but people don't do that in presenting. And the unfortunate thing about presenting is it's a sport you can only improve at by practicing in public. So you can't even rehearse well for a presentation. You can a bit, but the addition of humans in front of you is what makes it all happen. Yeah. And that's also the most exciting bit and where the payoff happens. What I would like to say to you, though, is, and to everybody listening, is that I don't believe you have a choice now. In the world that we're going into, and again, I own an AI company as well, so I'm very, very excited about the role that AI plays. But we need to be more than, we need to be T-shaped. It's not enough for us to be just good at our domain. We need to be good at our domain and something else. And I believe that something else in the world at the moment is being personable, being your ability to tell a story. In any field in the world, the person who can communicate will have an unfair advantage going forward over the person who cannot. I think that's always been true, but if ever there was a time for it to be true.
Why more now?
Because the value of human-to-human communication and authenticity is so high. We live in a world where, think about it, right? We have the influencers can create content. The creation of content is so easy that it's been commoditized. So smart things are commoditized. We can now use AI to write almost any article. We live in a world where attention spans are very, very short. So people want to tap in for 10 minutes and get out. I mean, I feel like we've hardly started. We're on 40 minutes here. But, people want to move on already. This isn't Joe Rogan. But attention.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I take that back. Yet.
Yeah.
So
that's the Bolshe 22-year-old in me.
There we go. I like it. That's what I wanted to see. Yeah. So shit.
Sorry.
Train of thought.
Yeah,
Go on.
sorry.
What was that? No. So
attention span and why we need that T-shape.
Right, and it's because that now we live in this world, right, where when I get on stage, there's a few things that happen. The first thing is that I have assumed authority. It sounds bizarre, but if I get on stage, ladies and gentlemen, having spoken in 46 countries, blah, 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 ex-rock and roll ready, Richard Mulholland, woo, everyone cheers, and the assumption there is that this person must deserve to be here. So by default, when somebody gets onto a stage, you assume their authority is theirs to lose. There's nowhere else that happens where you're assumed to be an authority figure. Okay, so it's yours to lose. The second thing is you get extended attention. If you are good, there's almost no other place in the world where people will just listen to you for 45 minutes. Like that doesn't, on YouTube it's hard. If I'm listening to somebody for 45 minutes on YouTube, I'm multitasking. Everybody listen to this right now. Somebody's cutting onions. Someone's at the gym. Someone's driving a car. Someone has missed the lot because they were having a conversation. Right? But in a presentation environment, you can get people's undivided attention. But the final thing, and this is why it's so important now, is authenticity. Is that we live in a world where there's low trust. Did Lyle write that article that's got his name on it? Is that video clip actually Donald Trump saying that? There's so little trust anymore. But when you have a human being on a stage in front of other humans, there's no faking it. It is the last bastion of true human connection and authority building that exists to all of us. So if you can build on social media, you can build on everything, but then you're fighting against everybody and their robots. But when you're on stage, it's you and the other humans. And in a world that's so disconnected, like I think we're disconnected. I think we're more connected than ever before, but dysfunctionally so. The human-to-human connection of being the expert in your field, but on a stage is the skill of the future.
And I assume if I expanded that out to, we talk about presentations here, stand in front of, or stood on stage in front of an audience. If I think about a role as a fairly new role to me as a CEO, where I've got to stand in front of a team of people once every quarter and talk, that's we're applying the same philosophy here, aren't we? Connecting with that team.
100%. Because
yeah.
Well, that's the job, though, right? The job is for us. People always say, great leaders listen. Good leaders listen. No, good leaders speak. Yeah. Right? Like you have to listen, but people follow people who step up. If you look to if you do a Google search for managers on Google, you'll find a bunch of pictures of stock photography pictures of people shaking their hands. But if you Google search leaders, you'll find a group of humans on a stage with their fist in the air, right? Because that's the thing. The difference between a leader and a manager is your ability to communicate. Yeah. That's why we created our free service, Atomic Talks. We took like a whole bunch of the latest business books and we turned them into 10-minute talks that you as the CEO can deliver to your team at your monthly meetings. It's like Blinkist for talks, and it's 100% free. And I would challenge anyone to give it a go. We wanted to take all the friction and pain out of delivering a good keynote. And it's because I believe that is the missing link for leaders.
Well, that's probably a nice place to finish when you talk about missing link. So, Rich, thanks for your time. Really insightful. I feel we could probably talk for another hour, even though it's unbelievably 45 minutes goes in a heartbeat, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, people want to reach out to you. What's the best way to do that?
For me personally, you can go to getrich.af. For missing link, go to ineedmissinglink.com. And for too many robots.wtf. Which I think, by the way, WTF is the greatest top-level domain.
I don't know what the other AF was.
Yeah, missing link AF.
Yeah, AF.
Yeah, so get rich.
It was .af.
Yeah, no. So getrich.af was a play on get rich.
Yeah. So it is what I thought it was.
But I was doing a talk in Bahrain, and it was on the screen behind me, and this guy came up to me and says, "Why Afghanistan?"
Oh, right.
Yeah. So that's where it's wrong. Yeah, there we go.
I assumed maybe it meant that, but it's too polite. Okay, great.
Rich, thanks. I think, from limousines in Johannesburg, Cape Town, when you were to riding your one-wheel skateboard in the Isle of Man, we're really grateful that you've chosen the island and that you've moved here. And, for me, it's been a pleasure having the conversations that we've had over the last few weeks and months. And hopefully you'll get to meet a lot more people on the island, and hopefully we can connect you with more and that your impact will be felt. So, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat to us today.
Thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate that. And that's my only objective here, is to have more interesting conversations with people on the island. I feel very thankful that the island has me. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Thanks for listening.